Welcome, everyone. It's Adam Caplan here, co-host of Inside the Birds, and we've got another edition of Inside the Tape with our friend. He's a senior producer at NFL Films, but most importantly, co-host of the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN, the one and the only Greg Cosell. Greg, great to see you here in Week 13.
Hard to believe, Adam. It's Week 13 coming up. Isn't it crazy?
I mean, the weather out east, folks, I think we've probably had our last good day on Wednesday or Thursday, depending where you're hearing this and when. But the bottom line is the weather's going to change at some point. We're actually going to have early winter weather soon. But the bottom line, as you said, we are in Week 13. And on today's show, it's going to be interesting because we're in a short week. We're going to change things up a little bit. We don't have time to break down all this tape in terms of showing you the visuals. But here, there's an upside. We've got much more time to talk about many more plays. So, Greg, let's get right into it, as we always do with Geoff Mosher and I. Geoff will be back with us next week. Let's get your overall thoughts of this 9-2 Eagles team. Specifically, how did the tape look like to you overall in that big win at LA?
Well, I'd answer it this way, and it's not just specific to this game because they won 7 in a row now, Adam.
Yep, sure.
And I think what's very clear is we have a team now with a defined identity. You know, this is not a team each week where we wonder what they're going to look like. They have a defined identity, and that's what you want as a team, because every team has strengths, every team has some limitations / weaknesses, and you want to build a team where you know what you are, and ideally every game plays out a given way. Now, obviously it's the NFL, so you never know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen this week, but up to this point, we now know that they're a team that is a run-first team on offense, and they do that extremely well. Not only with the back, who clearly is the best back in the league right now as we speak, and a quarterback who's a meaningful part of the run game, which is an important piece. And now they've become a very good defense as well. Now they lost an important piece in Brandon Graham. We can discuss that as well.
We will.
But they're a run-first defensive team, and they're built. Really, their offensive line is in many ways the foundation of what they are, along with Barkley. And this is who they are, and this is the way they play. So one thing to keep in mind, and I know a lot of fans with Patreon always ask about, oh, why can't they get off to great starts? Why don't they score a lot of points? Sure. That's not the way they're built to play right now. You know, so will they need to play that way at some point? Maybe. And then we'll see what happens. But they're not a team that's going to come out explosively and hit, 60-yard plays. They're really a war of attrition kind of team. They grind you down with their offense, and their defense keeps the game together. So, there's a stat, and I looked at it today, and I hope I'm exactly correct. If you look at Barkley's yards just in the second half, he'd be the 4th leading rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, it's really incredible. You know what's funny? Because as you were talking about this, we don't send notes to each other, so I'm not exactly sure where Greg's going to go. But he brought up something interesting. In 2022, their Super Bowl year, it was a quick strike team. Okay, and their second quarter scoring was ridiculous, but you knew what was going to happen. Hurts loved the deep ball. The league had to adjust to it, and it took the league about a year and a half to adjust to it. Jalen was unbelievable. He's like, "This is what I want to do. I see it. I'm throwing it to AJ." Whoever downfield, and it worked. Now they're coming out, and look, we talked about this in the spring. We weren't totally sure. We knew that they'd have to run the ball more. But would the foundation be the run game with Hurts included, but Barkley would be the identity piece. Yep. But the thing that shocks me, and you touched on this, nobody had any idea about this defense. You've studied Vic Fangio over the years. What were your thoughts coming into the season? I know you weren't at practice, but in the summer, right, maybe once or twice. But what did you think of the personnel that they had coming into the season?
Well, you didn't know because they obviously drafted an outside corner and a slot corner with their first 2 picks. So they obviously felt those positions needed to be addressed. So you didn't know. We had no idea what Quinyon Mitchell would be. We had no idea what Cooper DeJean would be. And he was coming off a major injury, so you didn't even know when he'd be ready. So, those are really 2 important positions in this league. Plus, just being honest, and this is all based on film, Darius Slay is not the player he was certainly 3 years ago. You can still line him up and play, but his traits and his level of play is diminishing a little bit. So, and I think there was a sense amongst many that maybe Blankenship is more of a stopgap safety than a real safety. And by the way, I think he's played terrific football, but we'll talk about that,
Yep.
another time maybe. But so you didn't really know about their secondary. That was something you just didn't know. And it's turned out that since Cooper DeJean has become essentially a starter because they've played about 90% nickel since he's
Yep.
become the nickel. Um, they've been a really, really good defense. And we'll get into this more on Sunday in the pregame show leading up to the Ravens, but it'll be really fascinating to see if that's the way they play this week because of who the opponent is. But just getting back to the general point, we
Yep.
had no idea. And I think they would tell you that they had no idea. You just don't know with rookies until they're out there.
Right. And then the other part, and this one is the one where nobody had any idea. In fact, Vic Fangio gave the truth on it. With Zach Bond, it was
Yeah,
Vic's idea.
great point.
Okay.
Great point.
That was the one
Yeah,
where I was like, we put this on our show to start the season. The only thing we were told was mentally, he's pretty good. Nice story. He's been a little bit better than we expected. We'll see what happens. And as you said, it's actually 3 weeks ago, and we'll get into the defense later in the show. Can't wait for that. But when you said he was borderline dominant, I'm like, wow, because you only base it on what you see. Okay,
that's
that's all
all.
you do. That's all we want you to do. That's all the fans want you to do. Everybody wants to learn from what you see. And when you're telling the truth and you go, hey, folks, I'm just telling you, this guy's borderline dominant. That is it for me. I'm like,
Right. And
that
that's
you couldn't have imagined this, Greg.
and your point's a great one that he's another guy. I talked about the secondary, but you're asking a guy to play a position he'd never played before, not even in college. And so you don't know. I mean, you have a feeling. Look,
Yeah,
you go through camp, you get a feel for Quinyon Mitchell, you get a feel for Cooper
sure,
DeJean, you get a
sure.
feel for Zach Bond, but you don't know until you play the games.
Right. Because remember, preseason training camp, I've likened this to AAA. OTAs is more double A. I've used this now line for six
Right,
years and
right,
it seems to work for me. And then the real thing hits, and it's funny when I would go to training camps and one team will say, "Hey, man, I think we're going to be really, really good," and then they're not. Sometimes the players aren't quite what they thought. But the thing
right.
is, this roster, Greg, I, we could all look. We're not doing an evaluation of the whole team, but it's certainly been way better than I expected. I picked them. We have to make the picks for the start of the season. And I picked them to be 11-6. I was like, man, I hope I'm not too high on this team. Maybe I wasn't high enough. That's the thing about this team. So
And you
it's
also, when you play, look, when you have a really good season, and
mhm.
and they certainly have had one up to this point, they've won seven
Yes,
in a row. There's always a little luck involved. Look, n no one thought that when they played Jacksonville, people thought Jacksonville would be a really quality team this year. They're not. You
true.
know, they got the Cowboys when after Dak Prescott was hurt. I mean, but these things happen in the course of a season. The fact is, you still have to win these games. I
Yep,
mean,
and they're
so
doing it.
they've
Yep,
won those games. Yeah.
yep, yep. All right, let's get right into it. We're going to go Eagles O versus the Rams defense. And Greg, we've really talked about this because they really haven't done it. I've been kind of disappointed because I would see Hurts on rollouts in training camp a little bit. I'm like, wow, boy, does he really throw the ball in the run well? And they just don't do it. So they did it in this game. Give us an idea of what the play call looked like to you. What did you see from Hurts on the move a little bit, rolling
Well,
out the pocket?
it's funny you say that because, you know, the Patreon group always asks me about why don't they score early? What are they
Yeah,
doing? I
sure.
actually thought in this game they came out with some really aggressive play calling to try to get Hurts comfortable because,
Okay.
you're talking about the first possession, obviously, where, they got him out of the pocket on design boot to his right and he hit Brown on the backside crosser. It was part of what we call a three-level flood concept, where it was a vertical route, an intermediate route, which was Brown, and a flat route. And basically, what they did is they cut the field in half. They gave Hurts a defined read and throw. That's good coaching. And by the way, that's not a function of Hurts. I've seen a lot of teams do that, even with quarterbacks. With every quarterback, so that's
Yeah.
just good. It's a defined read and throw. So you start the game off well. Then they followed that with a misdirection throwback to Browns with 17 yards. Hurts dropped in kind of an offset pocket behind the right guard Becton. Another well-designed play to get him comfortable throwing the ball. So they actually came out with some nice concepts, Adam, to really get Hurts involved throwing the football and feeling comfortable. I remember years ago, Phil Simms telling me, I worked with him years ago, and now he's a good friend, and I, talk ball with him, and
Hmm.
he said, the best thing for a quarterback early in the game is just to get completions. He said the yardage doesn't matter. You just
Hmm.
want to give a quarterback defined completions so he feels that he can complete passes. Because the worst thing for a quarterback is to be 1 for 6, because then he
Yeah,
feels
sure,
like, oh my God, when
sure,
am I going to complete a ball? You know,
sure, sure.
so I thought they came out really nicely. Obviously, it's not like they put up 20 first half points, but again, you never know how a game moves along. But I thought they were very conscious of throwing the football on their first possession and getting Hurts involved early in what he does well.
Yeah, it's funny on the define throws and so forth. I was watching a show last week, and Darius Butler, I love. By the way, you guys are really good together. And he
Appreciate it.
dropped this. He was breaking down the quarterback, and he goes, and blah blah blah. And I like the way they defined the throw, and he gave you a little bit of a
Yeah,
bump there. I
he
love
does
that.
that on occasion. Yeah,
I
it's
love that when he said because he wanted to give you credit because he likes to use that line because what you're trying to do is, and by the way, the best in the NFL doing this is Ben Johnson. The way that he makes it, nothing's easy, but he makes it easier on Jared Goff. Throw the ball here. He defines it for him. He schemes it open, and I thought, and I'm glad you brought this stuff up with how they helped Hurts get off to a better start early. People have said, "What's the problem in the first quarter?" As you mentioned it, why can't they make it easier for him? Why can't they move the ball better? I like what Kellen Moore did here, and I want to mention, I want to go over Mekhi Becton. We haven't talked about him a lot,
no,
starting
and
at
he's
right
he's
guard.
playing
Let's
well.
talk about him. What did he look like to you in this game?
Yeah, he's playing well. I mean, I think the whole O-line is, but he's playing well. Dickerson's playing really well. I mean, they have the two biggest guards in the league, basically. I mean, and surrounded by the little guy in the middle, Jurgens, who looks like a ninth grader compared to those guys. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
looks like a
funny.
little kid.
Funny.
But Becton and Dickerson are really playing good football. Look, the bottom line is, as you know, offensive linemen want to run the ball. These guys are getting excited. They're coming off the ball with some juice. I mean, I don't know if we'll discuss that specific play, but the first long Barkley touchdown, the one that was the first play of the third quarter,
Yep.
um, Dickerson was ridiculous on that play. We can walk through it,
How so? Do it. Let's go.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
go.
Well, so basically, it was the first play of the third quarter. The game was close. I forget what the score was. Were they up 13-7 maybe?
I
To
will
start
look
the
that up.
third. I think that
Keep going.
that
Keep
that
going.
might have been it. But anyway, the point is, it was the 70-yard touchdown was on the first play of the third quarter. It was mid zone. It was a mid zone concept. Okay. Um, and Dickerson was really the key to the run because he helped out Jurgens with Michael Hoyt, and he really just nailed Hoyt. He shoved him so Jurgens literally didn't have to make a great block. And then he climbed to the second level and he just laid out the linebacker Spates. And you don't see that very often. You just don't see offensive linemen literally push guys to the ground. And then
Wow.
Barkley made a great cut at the third level off Brandon Covey's block. But
Great
Dickerson
cover.
was just phenomenal on that play. I
Hmm.
mean, that was physical domination by Dickerson on that run.
Yeah, it was 13-7, and that touchdown you just described, the 70-yarder, to start the third quarter, made it 20-7. So as we move along here, as we go through the Eagles offense in this game in Barkley, he's been unbelievable. Right now, I vote in two polls. He certainly would get my vote for NFL MVP or offensive player of the year, whatever you want to call it. And they haven't had one. Adrian Peterson was the last running back to get it in
And I
2012.
agree with you, by the way. I think you're 100% right.
He is just Greg. We've talked about Barkley and his issues that he had with the Giants, staying healthy, second level running, not great, vision, not great. It's just amazing. You've pointed this out several times. He never looked like this before. What does that mean when you say that? What do you see that looks so great right now from him?
Well, number one, I'd say that, and again, I'm sure this is in his head. I'm sure because of the O-line that he's running behind, he feels so much more confident in just
Mm,
taking the ball and running instead of sort of trying to figure out where to find space. I think he feels that he can find space. And he's also, to me, he's looked much sharper with his cuts because Barkley's the way he's built and he's so powerfully built, he's a little stiff. Now, I don't want people to take that the wrong way. I'm not saying he's stiff and, doesn't have ability, but I mean, he's not, Barry Sanders. He doesn't have that kind of
sure.
looseness in his hips. Um, so so I think this year he's much looser. He's laterally looser and laterally more agile. And therefore, like the cut on that play that we just talked about, the 70-yarder, when he cut off Covey's block, that was really, really good. I'm sure people who are Eagles fans can see that. And the other thing that I think's been really, really good, and I know the individual working with him at the Eagles, and they've spent a lot of time together, is they've talked to him so much about just being physical when he runs inside, not trying to bounce everything out, not trying to hit a home run. Use your physicality, use your body lean, finish runs. And he's finished runs this year, Adam, better than he ever has, clearly. I mean, to me, and I hope people can visualize this. To me, the really good backs, because look, he's had long runs. He's had 9 30+ yard runs, which is absurd because that's not normal in the NFL. But normally, when you look at backs that are great, they can make a run that's blocked for 3 yards into an 8 yard run. That's what makes backs great. The long runs, that's like I said, that's ridiculous. That just doesn't happen. But that's what a great back is. When it's blocked for three, all of a sudden you look up and it's 2nd and 2. And he's done that this year better than he ever has in his career.
So the scouting term is he's always looking for work. He's always looking for somewhere to go. So
Right.
so you see these runs where he makes his own cut, right? He goes right, and then he sees something left and takes it. And I think if you want to be great, you have to have second level vision.
Oh, without
His
question.
is unbelievable.
But
This game, especially, Greg, I was just mesmerized. I couldn't believe it. It's
you
unreal.
also have to get downhill. In other words,
Yeah,
there there's two sides to looking for somewhere to go because you don't want to be one of those backs that's constantly looking for space and isn't following a path and getting downhill.
sure,
And that's what
sure.
he's done better this year. He was always looking for space, I thought too much, and he didn't work downhill and get the
Yeah.
hard yards. This year he's getting the hard yards.
Yeah, then you got to do that because I remember you telling us the one issue that you had coming in really is you didn't know could he be that grinding, sustaining back.
And he is now.
He is now, and that he answered yet another question. It's one thing to be 235, but the knock on him is he was kind of more finesse.
He didn't
We're not,
run like he was too right, right.
yeah, we're not seeing that anymore. It's
No, no, he's been truly special this year. And
yeah,
like I said, my guess is he's very, very confident running behind this all line.
and give Jamal Singleton, the run backs coach, credit. I mean, he is a really good coach. And Saquon's a great guy. I know talking to the Giants about him, he always took to coaching. He always wants to get
Yep.
better. Hall of Fame guy, and it's been really a special season. Now, one of the other things we've been wanting to see, and we know for years, Greg, the Eagles just were screen teams, but this game and a little bit, I would say recently, look a little better. What did the screens and no huddle and everything else look like to you in this game?
Well, they've been selective no huddle throughout the 7 game winning streak, and I think it's really been
Yeah,
effective for them. They don't use it as a quote unquote a foundation, but they'll
sure.
use it, and it's been really effective. And I think that that's obviously something they practice because you don't just do that on a whim. And they do it, and it works. And the bottom line with this offense is it's built on the run game. The pass game is, um, I don't want to use the word simple because that makes it sound like it's a negative, but the pass game, in a sense, is complementary to their run game. They don't do a lot conceptually in the pass game, and they haven't had to. They've been in control of these games. So they play like I said, Barkley, if you just take his second half yards, he'd be the fourth leading rusher in the league. That's ridiculous.
Hmm.
So they're just wearing teams down. And because their defense keeps every game close and together, they don't need to step outside of what they are. Now,
Sure.
could there be a game where they have to? Sure. But we'll see if that happens. And then, maybe there'll be a game where Jalen Hurts has to drop back by choice 40 times because the game plays out that way. But they haven't had to do that. And as long as they don't have to do that, they stay with what they are. I mean, you see the kind of balls Hurts throws. They're really kind of designed throws, scheme throws that work off what they do with their entire offense.
And by the way, I love that throw that he made. It was 3rd and 5. In fact, we were in a chat. We were in a live chat for Patreon members. They go, that is a great throw on 3rd and 5. It was a gotta have it play. It was third
Which
third
play you're
third
talking
and
about?
five. The 3rd and 5 play.
Are you talking
late
about
third
late in the
quarter.
third quarter?
Yep, love that throw. That stick his foot in the ground and throw that football. And I was like, you know what? That's a good throw right there. What did you think of
Yeah,
that
but
tape?
and that was set up beautifully because what they did, I know the play you're talking about. Brown shifted outside of Goddard. That caused a coverage adjustment to cover one. So they brought the safety curl to match Goddard, and Williams matched Brown, who essentially ran. They probably have a name for it. I just said it was a long slant. It
Hmm.
was a long slant by Brown getting inside of Williams, and I wrote in my notes with Hurts putting the ball right on him, giving him run after catch. So they set that up beautifully. It wasn't a big schemed play in the sense that there was a big route combination and he had to read through the a whole deal. It was beautifully set up to get the ball to Brown against a physical one of the most physical receivers in the league against a smaller corner. And Hurts put it right on him.
There's one more throw before we get to defense, Greg. In the second quarter, Hurts to Brown for 27 yards. Describe what that play looked like, because I know that was another timing play that we don't talk about a lot, because Jalen likes the big throw downfield and so forth. But that to me looked like a pretty
Oh,
good
that
throw.
was 3rd and 4 in the second quarter. That came out of 12 personnel.
Okay.
Rams were in big nickel. Brown ran what we call a stop route outside the numbers versus Williams. And Hurts threw that with really good timing and anticipation. Again, he put it right on Brown, giving him run after catch. That's more of a spot throw. You probably remember when you sat with Ron Jaworski and I for
Yep.
years, Jaws
Yeah.
would say, "Hey, there are throws I could put a blindfold on and make them." That's a spot throw. You work on that. And that is a throw you theoretically could make blindfolded because you're throwing it with timing and anticipation. And if you do it right, you're going to give the receiver run after catch, and that's what happened on that play. So again, outside the numbers, which is where he's most comfortable throwing the ball, and that was a really good throw as well.
Anticipation, Greg, before we move on, that's a term that I learned from you and Jaws. And is it really okay? It's kind of like Brock Purdy does it. I'm going to put, and Brady does it. I'm throwing it to that spot. You need to go get it. Is that what that means?
Um,
Someone? Explain it to us.
Anticipation is where you're throwing it more to a spot, yes, because you're throwing it before the receiver. Normally, normally, not 100%, we
Sure.
talk more about anticipation working between the numbers. Because the throw we just mentioned to Brown, yes, I did say anticipation, but that's more timing than anticipation.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anticipation, and I remember having this conversation with Steve Young years ago when
Hmm.
he was talking about how he had to really learn how Bill Walsh wanted him to play before he could become a great quarterback. Anticipation is like that's what Tua does a lot in Miami when he throws it between the numbers. Because a lot of times when I see the end zone shot of it when I'm watching tape,
Yep.
is you'll see him start to deliver the ball and the receiver's not even on the screen yet
Mm.
because he's
That is
throwing it
it's
to a spot,
spot, right? It's a
that he's
spot throw. Got
anticipating
it.
the receiver will be in, and this is practiced and practiced and practiced because you can't be wrong.
I thought Darius Butler did a great job when he broke down Jared Goff. He showed how, I mean,
Yep,
he was talking about defined throw, using your term, and how Ben Johnson schemes it up for him. Throw it here, throw it on time, throw it as the guy, as your target is in motion. That's a spot throw. And Goff, to me, it shows when you buy in. You just talk about Steve Young.
right.
Him and Ben Johnson got their timing down early in terms of, okay, here's what I want you to do. They got together, they worked together great. And I'm interested to see Hurts now with Kellen Moore. I'm glad you pointed out all these good things that Jalen did in this game. Because I think, listen, when you're with a new player you haven't coached before, I'm sure it's not like Kellen snapped his fingers and him and Dak became really good together. They were, by the way, for a while.
Right.
It takes time. You just can't snap your fingers. You got to figure out what the guy likes, doesn't like,
Yeah, and they're playing to
all
what
that.
Jalen
Yeah.
is right now. I mean, in an ideal world, would Kellen like to expand this offense in terms of the pass game concepts? Sure, he would. Every coach would, because they've got a lot of concepts. They've got a big playbook. But,
Yep.
the team is successful playing the way they are now. Look, Jalen Hurts is good at some things and not great at other things. And that's true with almost every quarterback, by the way, just so
Yep.
people understand that.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts is not a great progression reader. Jalen Hurts is not what we call a window thrower, the way someone like Goff is or Tua Tagovailoa is. That's not his game. But he does other things really, really well. And, you know, he's a little more accurate than I think people give him credit for, because like we just talked about two plays where accuracy was required, particularly the slant to Brown, the long slant. You got to put it right on him, and he did. So he's a little more accurate than people think on certain kinds of throws. But, he's not, you're not going to give him like a full field multi-level route
Sure.
combination. That's not the way he sees the game.
And by the way, I think you pointed this out in our with our Patreon group. You said it. Neither is not that they're the same level of talent, but you said Josh Allen, not a full progression reader. I think you also said Mahomes. Did you not?
Yeah, I mean, these are what coaches who coach against these guys told me. And like I said to the Patreon group, if I type that out as a tweet right now, people would tell me I'm an idiot and I don't know football. But these are
Yeah.
coaches. These are coaches who
Right.
coach against these guys telling me
Right.
this. And by
Right.
the way, I can see it on tape too. It's
Sure.
it's all
Sure.
it's all there. And sometimes guys improve. Like I saw Caleb Williams make throws this week that 4 weeks ago, I'm not even sure he would have considered throwing the ball. And then people think, well, 3 weeks ago you said this, or you're just looking for clicks. Well, you know what? Guys improve. I mean,
Yeah.
young players continue to, even older players. I mean, how many stories did we hear? And then we'll get to defense about
Yep.
Tom Brady, when he was in his 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th year, spending all that time with his quarterback coach, Tom Martinez, who I believe since has passed away in the off season because he wanted to keep improving. Bill Walsh told me a story. Joe Montana, after his first year with the Chiefs, when he was clearly a first ballot Hall of Famer, clearly, and Bill Walsh was not coaching in the NFL at the time, and Joe called Coach Walsh and said, Coach, I didn't feel really comfortable with my footwork this year. Can I come out and you can help me get it back to where it needs to be? I mean,
Wow.
this is what happens. Saying a guy is doing something now that he didn't do 3 or 4 weeks ago is not saying that, oh, you're lying. We live in a world now where, everybody said, oh, you're a liar. I mean,
Right.
this is what happens. Guys continue to work, they continue to improve.
Right. And all you're doing, you go, hey, here's what the tape looks like now. It doesn't mean he can't get better.
Correct.
That's it's like you made me think of one thing before we move on. Kurt Warner's a great example of this. Kurt Warner,
Yep,
I'm going to be honest with you, I thought he was finished with the Giants. He looked so bad.
he did.
It looked, let's call, and I know Kurt was unbelievable how he put the Cardinals on his back. You just got to let the thing play out before you say a guy can or can't do anything. You just go, here's what the tape looks like. Doesn't mean he can't get better.
Right.
It just takes, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And that is a great story. But one thing on Steve Young, I love when Steve Young said this. He struggled because he wanted to run a lot when he first got with Bill Walsh.
Oh, well, that's what he was.
Yeah, he was just a runner. And he said, until I trusted the system, because he was pig-headed, he just wanted to run around. And then I, you weren't at, I know you did a film series with Bill Walsh,
Yeah.
maybe obviously many years ago, well before he passed away. But it wasn't the one when Steve Young put the blindfold on. That was like incredible when he put the blindfold on, and I think he hit Jerry Rice over the middle.
Oh yeah, well, Young told me
Yeah,
that until he learned to throw the ball
yeah,
to where the receiver was going to be when he actually didn't see the receiver, he
yeah.
said, I had to learn how to do that, and that was so hard to learn.
It's incredible, man. Incredible learning the West Coast offense. But okay, so next up, we're gonna hit the Eagles defense versus the Rams offense. But first, Greg, I do want to mention our friends at Stretch Zone. First of all, I want to thank my friend Austin at the Exton location. I've had this issue with my upper arm. It's the traps area. For those of you who play racket sports, he gave me, I mean, this stretch that I got last Sunday was incredible. So I was able to play tennis that day. And Hassan, the manager of Exton, take care of my left hamstring on Wednesday. And I can't thank those people enough. I feel so good. I feel like Greg, and I know you're getting back. I know you've been telling us you're working out and stuff, and
Yeah,
that's great. And
yep.
yep, and as a guy who played basketball in high school, baseball in high school, you got to be loose, and that's why I go to visit my friends at Stretch Zone. 12 locations in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Chester County, or Main Line, Haverford near Suburban Square, Devon near the Whole Foods. I've been there many times. Exton, I just mentioned them in the Whiteland Town Center. The poorhouse is across from there if you like to go for a little beer. In South Philly near Graduate Hospital on 25th and Washington. Montgomery County, Elkins Park, where I grew up, right off Aldrich Road. Upper Dublin and the promenade off 611, Feasterville and Lower Southampton Village. And near you, Mr. Cosell, in Mount Laurel. In fact, I know it's near NFL Films because I passed this Wegmans in Centerton Square. We
Oh,
got to
I
get
know.
you.
Yeah, I go there
Yeah,
all the time.
we're going to get you in there because we know you need to feel loose. Cherry Hill, we know that. I listen. I know, man. It's tough when you know.
So I can
By the
make
way,
those laterally agile cuts like Barkley.
It's funny. I wanted to talk about the lateral agility. We haven't mentioned that in months, by the way, but we will. Where Geoff Mosher goes to the one in Cherry Hill. We're going to get to the one in Mount Laurel. They have one in Franklin Lakes on Franklin Ave, Northfield on Tilton Road, and Princeton and Nassau Park Pavilion. Go to stretchzone.com. Get your free 30-minute stretch. Just hit the button. It takes 45 seconds, folks, to fill it out and go in, feel like I have, and I've been a client for 3 years, and I'm never going away from those guys. They're phenomenal. StretchZone.com. All right, Greg, time for the Eagles defense and versus the Rams offense. Got to ask you about Brandon Graham. We know he's a
Yeah,
leader and all that. Okay, everybody knows we love the guy, but we're going to go from the tape study. What have you seen from him before this injury he's done for the season with it left torn triceps, which is back of your arm, by the way? What had the tape look like to you this season from BG?
pretty good. I mean, he's been a good player, and you can tell by the number of snaps he's playing that they feel the same way. That's the bottom line. And I mean, he had a sack early in this game where he ran around the right tackle. McClendon, the kid from Georgia, who he just beat off the edge. He's a multi-positional player. He was playing outside, he was playing inside. He's built low to the ground. He plays with great leverage, natural power. Just a really good football player. He's had a tremendous career. One of those guys that, not that he cares what I think, but that you just respect so much because he's not going to be a Hall of Famer, but it's those guys that I find to be so special as players because they do it year in and year out at a high level. Like I said, he's not going to be a Hall of Famer, and no one would suggest he is, but boy, every year he just shows up and is a really good football player. And because of the way in which he plays, and I'm sure his attitude and approach to the game, you got to put him out there. That's the thing. The Eagles coaching staff, and it's been different staffs, always told you what they thought of him because they kept putting him out there.
Yeah, it's funny, Greg, at 36, he turns 37, I think, in April. You just don't. Geoff and I were looking for players who were able to do this. And we're not talking about like Jerry Rice, who played
Yeah, how many
until his
D
40s.
linemen have been able to do what he's done over the
This is
course of a
crazy.
career?
This late. And if you remember, Greg, he starts his career.
Oh
He
my, I
tears.
remember I was doing a draft show
Go
for
ahead.
somebody at the time,
Okay.
and I was in a like a bar restaurant, and
Yeah.
Earl Thomas, was on the board,
You
and
had to bring this up.
yeah, and the Eagles drafted Brandon Graham, and everybody in the place is booing and
Yeah.
ripping the Eagles, and you know, and it's turned out pretty well.
Well, remember, they wanted JPP. Well, they went Earl Thomas first and JPP. I would argue, and you could disagree if you want, I think Brandon Graham was better than JPP. I know it's tough to say that. JPP was
JPP
one of the
probably
good
had
things.
better moments because
Yeah.
he was, you know, he was a more explosive edge rusher than
Yes.
Brandon Graham. So
Yeah.
he had better moments in his career and maybe a better year or two throughout a course of a career. But if you're just talking about consistency,
That's
longevity,
it. Yep.
toughness, competitiveness, my guess is he's great in the locker room because I've met him.
Oh, yeah.
He's a terrific guy.
Yep.
He's just had an unbelievable career.
The thing that surprised me is how good of a run defender he was. He never would get enough credit. What did the tape show you in that area?
Well, that's because he's low to the ground and can play with such tremendous leverage. So,
Okay.
he can get underneath guys, and low man wins. I mean,
Great.
that's just, the gospel in football. Low man wins, and he's plays really low to the ground. We looked him up the other night. He was only 6'1" and 3/8 at the combine, and he weighed only 268 at the combine. Maybe he got up to 280. I don't know what he played at in the league, but he certainly was not a 300 pounder. So
No.
he had to play
No.
with leverage, and he had to play with short area quickness, and he had to use his hands well, and he was really good at those things.
All right. So you talk about the low man winning. Now, Jordan Davis, as we get into the thick of
Yeah.
this tape, Jordan Davis, right when you think it's starting to happen for him, not as a pass rusher, we get it. That's not his deal. But there have been some, you pointed it out, that he's had some good snaps this season. But what did this game look like to you from Jordan
Yeah,
Davis?
I thought this was and again, it's just one game, but I thought in
Yeah,
this game, so I don't want to say he took a step back because it's one game. May have
sure.
been a bad game, but in this game, he got back in the habit of playing too high in the run game. And when
Mm,
you do that, no matter how big and strong you are, you generate no strength on contact and no power to move O linemen. And I don't know, maybe that's the reason he only played 15 snaps in the game. Maybe they saw it too. He only played 15 snaps, Adam,
mm,
and he's been playing
wow.
far more than that in recent
Yep.
weeks.
But there was one quality rush, I would think, against Stafford, because Stafford, I didn't think can move that well because Davis was chasing
Yeah,
him.
he
Did
had
that look good to you?
on the Rams' first possession, he
Yeah.
actually had a very good rush against the left guard, Avila, with a club rip move, and it forced Stafford out of the pocket. He ended up scrambling for 15 yards, but that's not relevant to what Davis did. And
Sure.
that was one of the few times, probably all season, that he's had a strong pass rush. Because keep in mind, I think there's been one snap this year when he's played on 3rd and 6 or more yards. So they
Mm.
don't play him as a pass rusher because he's not.
Yep. Yep. Now, his former college teammate at University
Yeah,
of
he's
Georgia,
pretty good.
Jalen Carter. They say violent in a good way. I mean, this guy continues to get it done. What did he look like in this game?
Really good. He's been playing really well. I mean, he had a devastating club move on the right guard Dotson. Um, he forced Williams outside. That was the play where Williams fumbled, on that first
Oh,
possession,
yeah.
where they were marching right down the field. Carter was responsible for that, even though Sweat and Rogers, theoretically caused the fumble. Carter was really responsible for it because he forced Williams to jump outside. And his club move on the right guard Dotson was just ridiculous. I mean, it made Dotson look like he was a little kid.
By the way, that play, that fumble, to me, that was a game changer because it looked like the Rams are starting to take control offensively.
They were marching right down the field.
Yeah, exactly. And he makes a big play. Now, a guy that you've been the number one guy in his fan club. Very few people out of the Philadelphia area know about Milton Williams, and you've been
Ah,
telling us now about 4 years about this guy. In fact, I remember when you brought it up one time, 3 years ago. Or you asked us on camera, why aren't people talking about this guy? I'm like, Louisiana Tech. No one really follows this guy. You've loved this guy from day one. What did the tape look like
yeah,
to
and
you,
just so
Milton
people
Williams?
understand, when you say I love this guy, I love him because of his tape.
Tape, just tape only, right? You don't know the
Yeah,
guy personally, right? You know
right.
what I mean, right?
I
You know what I
loved him
mean.
coming out of college.
Oh, did you? Okay, okay.
Yeah. He had a sack late in the third quarter on 3rd and 13, just outside the red zone, where he beat Avila. But he's been every week he flashes as a pass rusher. He's really been a foundational part of the Eagles' sub front pass rush group. I mean, he's played well all season. I mean, to me, look, I don't think anybody's going to look at him and think he should get like huge D tackle dollars, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the Eagles should really try to sign this guy because this guy is to me, a really important part of what they do in their sub fronts. And I think and he's consistent to me every week. Don't forget he had a sack as well, in the fourth quarter with the TT stun with Carter. Williams was the looper, Carter was the picker or the penetrator. Carter was probably responsible for the sack, even though Williams got it. But the point is, he's been a really good player, and I just think you got to find a way to keep him because Jordan Davis is not a pass rusher, and I would bet there's a big question in the organization whether he gets a second contract with the Eagles.
Oh, no question. Yeah, because he's got next May, I think his 5th year option is due. Let me ask you
Yeah,
this question on Milt Williams. With BG gone, because people keep asking us, we know that Million technically is not an edge rusher, but you've talked about how from the inside he
he
rushes
can, but
well.
he's really an inside guy.
Right. And that's yeah, I knew you were going to say
The
that.
edge
But I had
rushing
to
thing
ask.
is going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see where they go forward with this because you would assume Smith is going to get more snaps.
Hmm.
Jalix Hunt. I'm curious to see if Zach Bond ends up doing that, just because we'll see what Smith and Hunt can do. I mean, that's basically,
Yeah.
I assume they're the first two up, so to speak. They're the next men
That's all
up.
they have. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really it. I mean, we're going to get into a guy that I actually want to ask you about because the Eagles claim the guy off waivers. We'll do that before we get out of here. But you mentioned him, and you've mentioned in recent weeks, Nolan Smith is flashing more. What did he look like in this game to you?
Yeah, this game, he didn't flash to me as much in this game,
Yeah.
but he has shown individual pass rushes where you kind of go, oh, okay, I'd like to see more of that. But ultimately, he did show some speed to power on an edge rush versus the left tackle Jackson in the fourth quarter. He drove into Jackson, then extended his arms to generate some force. You want to see that he needs to use his arms because he's
Yeah.
not just going to run through people. He's not big enough to do that. So he needs to use his arms. He needs to extend them. He needs to create space. He needs to play off contact. You got to play off contact. You can't just run around people.
So, Greg, we mentioned the edge rush group, a guy that I know you liked a little bit more than Derek Barnett, and quite frankly, neither player became what a lot of NFL people thought they would be. But the Eagles claimed Charles Harris off of waivers from the Panthers.
Oh,
Yep. So we got to talk about him. We haven't talked about him. I just remember I mean, I remember you said it on the record, so we'll talk about it. I remember you saying, you know what, I like Charles Harris more than Derek Barnett's days in
I
college.
did, and I've been very surprised that he's
Yeah.
not turned out to be better than he is. He's shown flashes with different teams. He was with the Lions for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
he showed some flashes of being a good pass rusher. But it just never, again, I don't know why, but I felt he had the traits to be a quality pass rusher. He's long, he's athletic, he can bend. It just never really happened for him,
Mm,
other than flashes. But it's
sure.
interesting that they just picked him up because,
Mhm.
he has been playing, so it's not like it's a guy that hasn't been playing. So
Yep.
depending on what the Eagles think of him and what Clint Hurt thinks and the rest of the staff, he could get snaps.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiah Washburn will be in charge of him.
Yeah,
He coaches the edges, so we'll see. By the way, I do want to mention before we get to the secondary, Nakobe Dean continues to flash. What were your
he's
thoughts on
been
him
playing
this game?
well.
What do you see from him?
Yeah, he had a great pass rush this week where he got a sack. We just ran through Kyron Williams. You probably remember that play.
Oh yeah, I was
Yeah, I mean,
blown away. Yeah.
he ran right through him. Um, and I think he's been playing with a lot of juice. He's been making plays, outside the box. I think he's been playing well. He's been featured more as the fourth rusher when they go to their sim pressures, meaning it's still a four-man pressure, but the fourth rusher is a second level player, and it's been Dean. So I think Dean has clearly over the last, I'd say 3, 4 games, really shown up on tape.
All right, Greg, let's get to the secondary, and it just continues to go well for Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Your thoughts of their play and quite frankly, how they've played this season to date.
Really well, really well. I think Mitchell's been really good. Um, I mean, he just stays with receivers really well. He even has some snaps of press, but not a ton. But he's capable of doing that. That's for sure. Um, DeJean's been phenomenal because they've become a nickel defense. Like I said
Yeah.
when we started, literally about 90% of their defensive snaps since he became the guy have been at a nickel. So he's been really, really, he's so smart and savvy. He's physical. He's got range. I think the guy that's really worth talking about is Reed Blankenship.
Do it. Go ahead.
I think Blankenship's been really, really good. No one would say he's the best athlete at safety in the league, but in fact, he's been so good that when he missed the tackle on a Williams run on the first possession this week, you kind of went, "Oh my God, he missed the tackle," because he's been so good playing downhill as an alley filler in the run game that you were truly surprised that he missed a tackle. And he just has great awareness and coverage. Is he the rangiest safety in the league? No, he's not. Is he the most explosive? Of course not. But he just is a really good football player.
Hmm.
And you know
All right,
what?
before go
And
ahead.
he's a little bit of a tone setter. I talked to a coach on the
Okay.
staff who said that he's sometimes he sets the tone for the defense with the way he hits.
Oh wow, we I can't remember. Quite frankly, I can't remember last time we talked about Reed Blankenship because you he might get this interception, he'll break a play up, but you don't usually hear or about him being a tone setter
He's
with
a really good
physicality.
football player.
Wow. Oh, good. Can I ask you this question?
No.
Bye. Good job. Uh, we what happened? Middle Tennessee State. I get it's a small school, but he was a 4-year starter. Am I correct on that? I think he
He might
was.
have been a 5-year starter.
5-year. What the? Why was he not drafted? What was he not a great? Just because he's not a great athlete doesn't mean
It's
he's not a
it's
good
it's
football player.
it's
What the hell?
measurables. I mean, you know how that works for a
I
safety.
know.
And I'm going to see. I
You're
don't
such
even
a
remember
bias.
I'm not even sure he was at the combine, Adam.
It is really remarkable. Like okay, it
Uh,
doesn't have the great measurables. Doesn't the tape mean something?
All right, so here I'm pulling
Yeah.
up his measurables.
Go
They're not
ahead.
awful, okay?
Go ahead.
6 feet and 3/4. That's good size.
Great
2
size, really good size. Go
size.
ahead. Yeah.
Ran a 4.55. Is that what you want? No, but it's not like he ran a 4.7.
Yeah.
Um, vertical 33.5, probably not considered great for a DB.
Mm-hmm.
So his
Okay.
measurables were like okay, probably middle of the road. Um, but yeah, I believe I'm trying to think. Let's see.
So
Let's see.
Greg, I know from talking to
He was a
someone.
5-year starter. 5-year
Yeah.
starter.
5-year. Okay. The knock on him, foot quickness, step slow. He knows where the phrase that someone gave me, he knows where he wants to go, but he's not even sure if he can get there. Just late sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's you can't really I don't know if you could coach that. Maybe you can. You would know better than I. I'm not sure. But you don't has he looked slow to you?
No. I mean, again, if you're talking about him playing post safety and running from, sideline to
Yeah,
sideline, is he going to look the way some guys look? No, he's not. But, you know, they don't really ask him to do that a ton. So, again, it's part of asking, you don't ask a guy to do something he's not great at. But I
yeah.
also think he moves a little better than people think, you know.
Good, good.
So to me, he's just a good football player.
All right, Greg, before we get out of here, tell us what's on the NFL matchup show. I cannot
Ah,
watch.
this is
Can't wait to
yeah.
watch it this weekend. Go ahead, give us a preview,
Yeah,
quick preview.
one thing we've started to do because there's some big games is we've started to do some games as what we call full segment games. And the
Okay.
Eagles Ravens is a full segment
Oh,
game that our
oh,
show
what a
this week.
game. Yep, yep,
The other full segment game is Steelers Bengals because it's really the Bengals season, and
yep.
it's a very odd thing going on in Cincinnati because one could argue that Joe Burrow is playing the best quarterback in the league, but they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. Um, then, 49ers Bills. I guess we don't know about Brock Purdy at this point, but the
Yep.
Bills have also won 7 in a row. I'll tell you what's a really big game, Adam. Really big game is Cards at Vikings.
And who knew the Vikings at 9-2, Greg? I didn't see it. I didn't see it. In fact,
No,
even the Cardinals being a competitive team, and they had a
yeah,
bad
and
loss
Sam
last week.
Darnold's playing really, that gets down to the whole thing about coaching quarterbacks
Yep.
because Kevin O'Connell's one of the best, and
Yep.
and Darnold's just looking like a different guy.
It is an amazing story. Good for Sam. He's been through a lot in his career. He finally found a home with a guy who believes in him. That's the other key at quarterback. You got to find somebody who believes in you. Liam Cohen with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah,
That's been a great marriage. You're seeing it. Bryce Young, by the way, has he played a little better in your
yeah. I
eyes?
didn't watch that tape. It's
Yeah,
Wednesday when we're doing this.
gotcha.
I didn't watch that tape, but I
All
mean
right.
his numbers were as good as they've been in his career.
Yeah, good for him. Good for him. All right,
He's a
Greg,
great
great
kid.
stuff. Great stuff, man. This was a great 45 minutes here. For Greg Cosell, I'm Adam Caplan. We'll see you next on a pregame show. Thanks for watching.